Hi, PerspectaWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Thursday, September 5th. Hurricane Dorian regained some strength in the overnight hours as it has moved over the warmer waters of the Gulf Stream, and it is now a major hurricane once again, Category 3 with maximum sustained winds at 115 miles per hour. It is moving slowly still to the north at around 8 miles per hour, not that far off the South Carolina coastline, and it will pound the coastal part of the Carolinas over the next 24 hours or so. Places like Charleston, South Carolina, Wilmington, North Carolina, all the way to the Outer Banks of North Carolina will unfortunately be pounded away by Hurricane Dorian again over the next 24 to 36 hours or so. By midday tomorrow, the hurricane should be not far away from the Outer Banks of North Carolina and then become increasingly influenced by an approaching trough in the upper part of the atmosphere, moving across the Great Lakes towards the east coast. That will cause Hurricane Dorian to accelerate to the north and east. Kind of becomes post-tropical on Friday, can impact the mid-Atlantic region in many ways like a nor'easter, with the biggest impact at coastal sections of New Jersey, the Delmarva Peninsula, Long Island, Connecticut, for example. Maybe some rain and wind all the way back to the I-95 corridor, and then Hurricane Dorian moves all the way to Nova Scotia later in the weekend and then out into the North Atlantic. But by no means will that be the end of the Atlantic Basin tropical season. We have a very active look to the pattern over the continent of Africa, and here is an infrared satellite image just from a few hours ago over Africa, and it is quite active indeed. This is the west coast of Africa right here, and look at all these tropical waves. There's one just off the west coast of Africa. Here's another one, yet another couple of tropical waves over Africa, and they are all moving to the west in the trade winds. Many of these will become players in the tropical part of the Atlantic Ocean over the next week, 2, 3 weeks or so. We've talked about the climatological peak of the Atlantic Basin season around the middle part of September. The real season around here extends from, let's say, middle August to the middle part of October, so we have several weeks to go, and just a tremendously active pattern here over Africa. As of a couple days ago, we actually had 3 named tropical systems in the Atlantic Basin. Of course, Hurricane Dorian has led the way, but we also have Tropical Storm Gabrielle in the eastern Atlantic and Tropical Storm Fernand over the western part of the Gulf of Mexico that has since dissipated over Mexico. Gabrielle looks like it'll move into the open part of the central Atlantic, not a threat to land, and then of course we're still dealing with Hurricane Dorian, but by no means will the tropical season become quiet once Dorian passes on by into the open waters of the North Atlantic. Well, let's kind of take a big picture look of what I expect to happen over the next 24 to 48 hours or so along the eastern seaboard, and then we'll get into the fine details about Hurricane Dorian. First of all, current location just off the South Carolina coastline. Again, reached major hurricane status in the overnight hours, now a Cat 3 with max sustained winds at 115 miles per hour. This entire stretch from of the coastal Carolinas, from the Outer Banks all the way down through South Carolina, will just be pounded by Hurricane Dorian, either as a Category 2 or Category 3 hurricane over the next 24 to 30 hours or so. The Outer Banks of North Carolina, Wilmington, North Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, right in this region right here. In many ways, this could turn out to be worse than Hurricane Florence about a year ago, but tremendous rain, tremendous wind, and in the past several hours there have been numerous tornadoes along the coastal Carolinas. This system will could very well move inland anywhere along this stretch here in South Carolina, or even more likely perhaps in North Carolina, and end up over the Outer Banks by about midday on Friday, tomorrow. And then an approaching trough over the Great Lakes will increasingly influence Hurricane Dorian. It will accelerate off to the north and east, and ultimately, it looks like it'll act as kind of a nor'easter for the Mid-Atlantic region. A typical nor'easter, the biggest impact is along coastal sections of New Jersey, Delmarva Peninsula, for example, coastal Long Island, and that will be the case on Friday. There can be some rain and wind all the way back to the I-95 corridor region, but again, the worst impact, probably tropical storm force winds across coastal New Jersey and Delaware, for example, 30 to 50 mile per hour winds. And the winds will be out of the northeast, just like a typical nor'easter, and it'll be quite cool indeed. Cooler air has moved in the Mid-Atlantic region today. Perhaps gets even cooler tomorrow with the post-tropical Hurricane Dorian racing off to the north and east, well east of the Mid-Atlantic region. However, again, there'll be kind of a baroclinic zone, a temperature gradient zone setting up here all the way back into the I-95 corridor region with cool high pressure to the north and west, and the departing post-tropical Hurricane Dorian off the coast will stiff northeast winds, and again, perhaps tropical force along coastal sections of the Mid-Atlantic region on Friday. Well, let's start off with a close-up visible satellite image from Penn State EWOL site of Hurricane Dorian. Again, a rather large eye. It has strengthened to Category 3 status. Again, here is the eye, Charleston, South Carolina, right about in this region right here. Still moving to the north, but will gradually turn to the north-northeast and then the northeast. Again, it could very well wobble inland anywhere in South Carolina or perhaps more likely in North Carolina over the next 24 hours or so, on its way to a position right near the Outer Banks by midday on Friday. The entire section of the coastal Carolinas, South Carolina, North Carolina will be pounded away at, unfortunately, over the next 24 hours or so. Again, not only a tremendous rain and wind, but some tornadic activity as well. And in some areas there can be flooding as bad or even worse than with Hurricane Florence a year ago. And certainly some of the wind gusts can be higher than what occurred a year ago with Hurricane Florence in the coastal Carolinas. And then again on Friday it becomes more of a nor'easter for the Mid-Atlantic coastal regions with some stiff northeast winds, quite cool conditions, perhaps 30 to 50 mile per hour winds along coastal sections of places like New Jersey, Long Island, and Delaware. Well, here's kind of a big picture look at Hurricane Dorian as of this morning, Thursday morning. This is a water vapor satellite image from the Penn State EWOL site. There's the eye right here just off the coastline of South Carolina. If you're seeing clouds right now in D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, they are all part of the overall system of Hurricane Dorian. Look at the back edge of these high clouds now, all the way back into south central Pennsylvania, throughout West Virginia, all the way back in this region right here. Again, it'll tend to move in this fashion over the next 24 hours or so, be in a position right over the Outer Banks by midday Friday, and then accelerate off to the north and east and reaching the Nova Scotia part of Canada during the latter part of the weekend, and ultimately out into the open waters of the North Atlantic. Well, here's the latest radar loop coming out of the Charleston, South Carolina area. Again, a wide eye right now, perhaps about 60 or 70 miles away from Charleston, and bands are rotating around well inland into the South Carolina region, and there are some tornadoes being reported in South Carolina at the current time here, and that pattern will exist over the next several hours as it turns slowly to the northeast and then rides parallel to or just over the coastal region of South and North Carolina. Again, it could wobble inland at any one of these locations over the next 24 hours or so, finally arriving in the Outer Banks region early tomorrow morning, and then it will accelerate out to the north and east. But again, a quite impressive eye wall right here with some of these bands producing hurricane force winds right along the coastal region of South Carolina, and that will take place as well across North Carolina later today, tonight, going into the early part of the day on Friday. Again, moving slow and not going to lose much strength at all. It'll go back and forth perhaps between a Category 2 and a Category 3 storm over the next 24 hours or so. By the way, an interesting fact, North Carolina is the second most impacted state by hurricanes in the U.S. behind Florida. Has never been impacted by a Category 5 storm. And it looks like this one, again, will maintain Category 2 or 3 status over the next 24 hours or so as it pounds away at the coastal part of South and North Carolina. Well, one of the reasons why Hurricane Dorian actually regained some strength in the overnight hours is because it has moved over warmer waters of the Gulf Stream, and that is also a reason why it should maintain a lot of strength over the next 24 hours. Look at this tongue of warm water right in this region right here. These are actual sea surface temperatures, not anomalies, but actual temperatures right here. This is a very warm tongue of water here. Hurricane Dorian sitting right now on top of some of this warm water and moving in this direction. It'll continue to move over warm waters. Here is a cool spot over the Bahamas, and that was actually caused by Hurricane Dorian when it was sitting nearly stationary for about a 24-hour period. It churned up the water underneath its center, and that upwelling process resulted in colder water from deep down to rise up to the surface, and it actually cooled off the sea surface. That in turn helped to weaken, considerably helped to weaken Hurricane Dorian. It was a Category 5, then it dropped to a 4, 3, and 2 in this time period when it was basically weakening itself as it remained stationary over the northwestern part of the Bahama Islands. Having moved away from that cool spot, now over the warm Gulf Stream, again, it helped to regain some strength in the overnight hours, now back to a Category 3, and that Gulf Stream will play a role over the next 24 hours or so with Hurricane Dorian. Well, one final map I'd like to show here is from the NOAA's National Hurricane Center. They're based in Miami. This is the probability of tropical storm force winds with Hurricane Dorian over the next couple of days. Again, located right in this region right here, just off the South Carolina coastline. The main impact, of course, looks like it'll be on Friday along the coastal regions of the Delmarva Peninsula and New Jersey, Long Island. Potential tropical storm force winds of, let's say, anything above 40 miles per hour is considered tropical storm force, and that definitely is on the table for New Jersey coastal regions, Delaware coastal regions, Lewes, Delaware, for example, Atlantic City, New Jersey. Certainly can get in the 40 to 50 mile per hour range of winds on Friday as Hurricane Dorian becomes post-tropical, much like a nor'easter for the mid-Atlantic region. Can be some rain and wind all the way back into the I-95 corridor region. Philadelphia, for example, certainly can see some rain and wind out of the northeast, but the biggest impact, just like with the nor'easter, down at the shore. Can be some coastal flooding as well in places like Virginia Beach, certainly in line for tropical storm force winds, and even hurricane force winds down across the southeastern part of Virginia, and definitely hurricane force winds over the Outer Banks. But this is the general track reaching Nova Scotia area by the latter part of the weekend, and then ultimately out into the North Atlantic. But as we saw up front, the Atlantic Basin tropical season looks like it will remain very active over the next few weeks. That's it for now. For PerspectaWeather.com, I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.